Richard Clarke is a man born with the unnatural ability to control all reality around himself, whether it be granting himself immortality, stopping bullets in midair, or destroying his enemies with a mere thought. He is often feared as a god on Earth. However, outliving everyone he ever loved whilst losing friends to the limitations of his powers causes a heavy burden upon his shoulders. And in the 21st century, Clarke is a stoic loner, traveling and living only to kill evil. He has no time for friends or family, but all that changes when he meets a dedicated doctor working in the dark streets of Detroit. In Detroit, Clarke vows to eliminate all gangs terrorizing the city's populace. However, after delivering a junkie with a broken leg to a hospital, Clarke is given a chance to end his decades of rampages, killing criminals and villains. Instead, he is offered a chance to work in the hospital along the idealistic doctor, Chloe Hall. His powers give him an incredible edge in the emergency room, and he soon realizes that he could save everyone who comes through the hospital doors. But the gangs are still out there, and Clarke has to make a choice. Should he keep killing, or should he begin saving lives? That which is destroyed cannot be repaired, that which is mended cannot be maintained. Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor. Today's video, assuming the title or the fact that I just read a synopsis didn't give it away, is another book review. The book in question this time being Microgod by K.R. Martin, better known to the internet by his alias Crimson Rogue. Under this persona, he reviews various movies and books, compares movie adaptations to the book source material, and does long-form reviews, or rather commentaries, on books that are notoriously bad. Given this particular field of activity, one has to wonder how effective he is when he has to write something of his own. So I thought I'd seek it out and find out for myself, and hopefully you will agree with my assessment. And as such, I found Microgod. What is Microgod about? Well, it follows one particularly, one could almost say strangely, calm interval in the immortal life of its protagonist, Richard Clarke. There is a gang war occurring, as the synopsis also mentioned, but most of this book, or rather novella, because it's only 58 pages long, you can shoot through it in 2 hours. Most of it really focuses more on his potential outside of violence, or at least that's where most of the narrative weight and emphasis is really generally placed, I will say. That being said, what makes this book distinctive? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the prose. Martin is very skilled at setting the scene, and at really presenting the dimensions and sensations that surround the events of the stories. Buildings crumble. Rooms are cramped and dirty. Beds are small and hard. Machines groan and spark. It all contributes to this almost post-apocalyptic tableau that he himself is painting. As another thing that really stands out is how Richard Clarke's powers are presented. He does indeed have the powers of a god, but they are only effective within a very small, or rather a very deliberately delineated range. He can extend that range to some extent, yeah. He can enlarge that range to some extent, but not for long. And I can tell Martin had a bit of fun with figuring out how exactly his powers work, and what would make him and how they can most effectively be used. And to be honest, it was also quite fun to read. Richard himself is a very interesting character as well. Not necessarily through his backstory, which is actually underemphasized in the novella, but more through how he observes and assesses and reacts to the various situations around him, and to how dogged and determined he is to follow up on a goal once he sets it. Those are really the things that make him interesting. I'm not a particularly big fan of his lack of wisdom, given his supposed age and experience levels, and also I think that some of his ideas of concerning what the common good is and what helpful contributions to society look like are bizarrely simplistic, but overall he is still an interesting character, and not just in spite of his flaws, not because of his flaws either, but more, just in general. The standout character from this novella, however, to me is Dr. Chloe Hall. Idealistic, resolute, principled, and empathetic, she comes alive to a much higher degree than pretty much in any other character in this story, and really sells the drama within which she finds herself. That would be saying a little bit more if the rest of the cast around her and around Richard actually would not be as flat and one-dimensional as it is. I still know their names and their roles throughout the story, but none of them really got me invested into their into their characters or their outcomes. I was like, oh, something happened to them? Oh, okay, it happened. What's coming up next? That was kind of my thoughts when reading through them. Thankfully, the dialogue does actually make more recognizable efforts towards making these characters and this story more interesting and more engaging to follow up on. There is some level of gangsta speak in this book, but I am willing to let that slide because, for one, it is to be expected, and for another, it is actually employed quite well for the most part. And whenever it is employed, because it's not all of the dialogue, and in fact most of the dialogue is more reflective of how people generally talk. But I do appreciate the fact that Martin has been able to give each character their own distinctive flair. So yeah, dialogue scenes don't really come up a lot, but whenever they do, they are always very interesting to. They're always very interesting to read. So yeah, overall this is an overall well done book, with one glaring problem, namely the plot. The plot would just kind of fades out of existence halfway through the story, leaving the rest of the narrative to just kind of meander through. That is especially disappointing for two reasons. Reason number one, there were plenty of seeds of various plots that this book could have explored. It could have either been a very interesting mix of action thriller and crime drama. It could have been an exploration on the nature of redemption, or it could have been a character piece about a man who learns to reassess his relationship with violence. However, the book doesn't really have any of the tact or the dedication necessary to really explore any of these topics to the level that it would benefit. And because of that, the story becomes much less interesting. The second problem here is that instead of these plots, the climax tends to the story, and then all the way, and the story goes on a troubling tendency, which is most obvious in the climax, of having to rely on undercooked cliches, which even at the time of this book's writing were very much overdone. So yeah, not a great look overall. That being said, while I recognize that this book has some missteps, I still think it is worth recommending for anyone who has somewhere around 2 hours to kill and thinks any of the elements I've described so far would elicit their interest. My final rating for Micro God is a 3 out of 5. And that was my review. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like and maybe even share this video wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add to this video, the comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My own book, Heir to the Empire the Next Generation, is available at most major book retailers under a master link in the description down below, right past my social media, which I also suggest you check out should you feel so inclined. Until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.